And I have sort of worked it around the United States chart and looking at what is happening over the next 5 years. Now, before we sort of, delve into the 5-year thing, I just really want to just say what we need to consider, because an hour is so not long enough to look at something, especially when you're looking at a 5-year period. So like I said, I've sort of condensed it. But feel free to ask any questions. We can, have a look at anything that I haven't done if we've got time at the end as well. And I think, first of all, what we need to consider, and the cycles, we are still suffering from 2020 and 2021, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which of course, brought us COVID. And it was sort of, a very historical year, bookended by the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. And then, of course, last year we had these continuous Saturn-Uranus squares. So we're still building on that. Everything that was very much from that January 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction, all those same issues are still outstanding. And that is how we can measure the sort of debris of it. If you think about the 2020 January conjunction, I mean, at the time in the US, you had the Trump impeachment, you had Harry Weinstein being trialed. In the UK, we had Harry and Meghan exiting, and we had Prince Andrew. All these things are not quite over. And so, that is a good measure of how long that Saturn-Pluto lasts for. And of course, COVID, we can see that sort of on the way out, but, people are a little bit concerned about April, and we'll discuss that. And then, of course, last year we had these Saturn-Uranus squares all through the year. So we're still not, and I don't mean the trauma, I mean, we're still actually dealing with these issues. And that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius is going to lead us into an era, of course, which you've probably heard over and over again, entering the air element. So, and that will be built on, and I'll talk about that a bit later as we go. So the other things we need to consider, without giving you all a lesson of mundane astrology, but I just want to say that because I haven't been able to, I won't have the time to go into everything, but we need to look at the major planetary cycles that are going to follow in the next 5 years. These are primary in looking at what is going to unfold. We can also look at the solar ingresses. So we look at the Aries and the Libra, the spring equinox ingresses, what is happening at those. We can also look at, the quarter ingresses as well, so the solstices and the equinoxes, to see the theme of the years. And I will be looking at sort of a couple that are relevant, particularly to the US, for 2021 and 2022. We also need to take into consideration the outer planetary ingresses. So when, for example, Neptune moves into Aries, Uranus moves into Gemini, and most significantly when Pluto moves into Aquarius next year. And we need to think about the eclipses that are going to occur. And there are many, and I've plucked out a couple. And when we look at eclipses, it's important to think of not just what degree it's happening. So when we think of the degree, we think, okay, how does that affect? How does that affect certain countries? And so we have to look at these eclipses in different ways. We need to look at like if what certain degree will pick up a national chart. How will that affect that country? And also national leaders. And also we can put this on an astrocartography map to see where that particular lunation will arrive on the planet. And we can also look at the visibility of eclipses as well, where they will be seen in the world in terms of strength and timing as well. We need to sort of look at astrocartography, so where things unfold in the world. We'll go through a bit about that tonight. And also one thing that's quite overlooked, I think, in mundane astrology, when you're looking at what's happening in a 5-year period, and what's so specific about what we're going through now and have done since 2020 really, is groupings of planets. Andre Barbeau, who is sort of, the founding modern mundane astrologer, he passed away a few years ago, but he wrote for 7 decades. And even the book on mundane astrology by Campion, Bayesian, and Harvey, references him in every chapter. And so I do recommend reading Andre Barbeau. The AA, we have translated 2 of his books, and I'll put some quotes from him today in this webinar. But he discusses groupings of planets in the sky, which is very relevant to today. So I will put on today's chart for the start of this webinar to give you an example of what that is. And he talks about when there is a bundle of planets in the sky, then, this is a very highly concentrated time. It's a time of focus. But, on another side too, the more challenging side, it's difficult to sort of see things more wider and broader, where sort of, things sort of happen in a vacuum, if you like. So it's important to sort of see the chart as this bundle, which we've had since 2020, and it will continue for some time. And when you have planets in a bundle, so in a very small part of the zodiac within a trine, of course, for half the year, if you like, you've got the moon that for when it comes out of that trine, it's traveling through the rest of the zodiac. So I find this quite fascinating, really, when you think about the generations born of this, that are all going to have this basically bucket-shaped chart with a moon as the handle of that bucket shape. That says a lot about the generation that's going to come forward, but it also says a lot about what we're living through now in terms of the care industry, and all things lunar, lockdown, which can be attributed to, of course, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, but the moon, it's about being in our home, it's about family, food, things like that. So it's just something to consider. Declination and out-of-bound planets. I am going to mention this briefly tonight, but these are just things I just want to put to you in terms of what we may consider when we're looking at a long period of time. And the nodes changing, of course, because the nodes changed from Gemini Sag to Taurus Scorpio at the beginning of this year. So that's also something to consider as well. Now, here is a chart for today, set for the time of the webinar, set for Washington, the capital of the US. And the reason I want to show you this chart is because I do a free webinar every fortnight. If anyone wants to join, it's free, looking at the current climate. I can put a link if anyone wants a link. Remind me at the end, and I can put a link to you. It's free, and you can get the recording the next day. And it's basically a bunch of astrologers discussing the current situation. And what we discussed Thursday week ago was this particular lineup of planets. And we said for the first, from about the 23rd of February, which is exactly when Russia invaded Ukraine, up until the 3rd of March. And what we have here is a really tight bundle in the sky, but we have this really tight stellium in Capricorn, this Venus, Mars, Pluto in Capricorn, very, very tight. And it's quite interesting because what has happened, I did yesterday, my daughter, my second child, was born in October 1997. And she was born with a really tight Venus, Mars, Pluto conjunction in Sag. and it's really interesting because this particular period in her life has just gone crazy in a very positive way. Um, and it made me do a sort of retrospective look at how often that happens. So again, this is it's a very tight stellium. I mean, quite interesting. It picks up Prince Andrew's Venus-Mars conjunction as well. So it was very favorable to him. Well, probably personally.